It was November 17th, 1986, and a huge Japanese Boeing 747-200F cargo aircraft was en route from Paris, France to Narita International Airport near Tokyo, Japan. It was an uneventful flight until the aircraft was above Alaska near Anchorage. At 1711 hours, crew noted specifically that they observed two strange objects coming up to the left side of their aircraft. They rose from below and proceeded to maintain a similar speed and appeared to be escorting the cargo jet. All three crew members, Captain Kenju Terauchi, an ex-fighter pilot with more than 10,000-hour flight experience, in the cockpit's left-hand seat, co-pilot Takanori Tamefuji in the right-hand seat, and flight engineer Yoshio Tsukuba all witnessed the objects approach the flight. As the objects got closer, they noted each had two rectangular arrays of what appeared to be glowing nozzles or thrusters, though their main frames remained obscured by darkness. The captain believed they were some sort of military aircraft and were simply identifying the flight, but their maneuverability was mind-boggling. Quote, "The thing was flying as if there was no such thing as gravity. It sped up, then stopped, then flew at our speed, in our direction, so that to us it appeared to be standing still. The next instant it changed course. In other words, the flying object had overcome gravity," recalls the captain. Then suddenly the two objects came closer and illuminated the entire cabin and produced an intense heat. Air traffic control was notified at this point, who could not confirm any traffic in the indicated position. After 3 to 5 minutes, the objects assumed a side-to-side configuration, which they maintained for another 10 minutes. Each object had a square shape consisting of two rectangular arrays of what appeared to be glowing nozzles or thrusters, separated by a dark central section. The captain speculated in his drawings that the objects would appear cylindrical if viewed from another angle, and that the observed movement of the nozzles could be ascribed to the cylinder's rotation. The two craft then departed as quickly as they came, but then the crew noticed something even more strange. A much larger craft was now tailing them. This time they could identify its shape, and each of the crew had detailed a disc-shaped flying craft was behind them. Captain Terauchi now noticed a pale band of light that mirrored their altitude, speed, and direction, setting their onboard radar scope to 25 nautical miles. He confirmed an object in the expected 10 o'clock direction at about 7.5 nautical miles, and informed air traffic control of its presence. Anchorage found nothing on their radar, but Elmendorf's NORAD Regional Operations, the control center, directly in its flight path, reported a surge primary return after some minutes. As the city lights of Fairbanks began to illuminate the object, the captain believed to perceive the outline of a gigantic spaceship on his port side that was twice the size of an aircraft carrier. The object followed in formation or in the same relative position throughout the 45-degree turn, a descent from 35,000 feet to 31,000 feet, and a 360-degree turn. The short-range radar at Fairbanks Airport failed, however, to register the object. Anchorage Air Traffic Control offered military intervention, which was declined by the pilot. The object was not noted by any of the other two planes which approached Japan Airlines 1628 to confirm its presence. And as these other two planes approached, Japan Airlines 1628 had also lost sight of it. The captain cited in the official Federal Aviation Administration report that the object was indeed a UFO. In December of 1986, he gave an interview to two Kyoto News journalists. Japan Airlines soon grounded him for talking to the press and moved him to a desk job. He was only reinstated as a pilot years afterwards, and retired eventually in North Kanto, Japan. Kyoto News contacted Paul Stewick, the FAA Public Information Officer in Anchorage, on December 24th and received confirmation about the incident. The FAA's Alaskan region consulted John Callahan, the FAA Division Chief of the Accidents and Investigations Branch, as they wanted to know what to tell the media about this UFO. John Callahan at the time was unaware of the incident and considered it a likely early flight of a stealth bomber then in development. He asked the Alaskan region to forward the relevant data to their technical center in Atlantic City, New Jersey, where he and his superior played back the radar data and tied it in with voice tapes by videotaping the concurrent playbacks. A day later at FAA headquarters, they briefed Vice Admiral Donald D. Engine, who watched the whole video for over a half an hour and asked them not to talk to anybody until they were given the okay, and to prepare an encompassing presentation of the data for a group of government officials the next day. The meeting was attended by representatives of the FBI, the CIA, and President Reagan's scientific study team, among others. Upon completion of the presentation, all present were told that the incident should remain secret and that their meeting never took place. They even asked Callahan to destroy all the evidence. According to Callahan, the officials considered the data to represent the first instance of recorded radar data on a UFO, and they took possession of all his presentation data. John Callahan, however, managed to retain the original video, the pilot's report, and the FAA's first report in his office. The forgotten target printouts of the computer data were also rediscovered, from which all targets can be reproduced that were in the sky at the time. After a 3-month investigation, the FAA formally released the results at a press conference held on March 5, 1987. Here, Paul Stewick retracted earlier FAA suggestions that their controllers confirmed a UFO and ascribed it to a split radar image, which appeared with unfortunate timing. He clarified that the FAA did not have enough material to confirm that something was up there, and though they were accepting the descriptions by the crew, they were unable to support what they saw.
The report that was made last November 17th of a UFO spotted over Alaska attracted special attention. This sighting was made by an airline pilot with 29 years of experience.
The crew claims that while it was flying over Alaska last November, it was followed for 400 miles by strange white, yellow, and amber lights.
The sighting received special attention from the media as a supposed instance of the tracking of UFOs on both ground and airborne radar, while being observed by experienced airline pilots, with subsequent confirmation by an FAA division chief. It would have been the end of the UFO story, but for an extraordinary observation by a military aircraft just a short time after the Japan Airlines incident. On January 30th, 1987, a U.S. Air Force KC-135 was flying from Elmendorf Air Force Base, Anchorage, Alaska, to Eielson Air Force Base near Fairbanks. The crew of the KC-135 reported a large, silent, disc-shaped UFO at about 20,000 feet altitude. At this time, Anchorage radar control showed nothing unusual. In a moment, radar control asked the pilot of the plane if they still had the unknown object in sight. The frightened pilot replied yes and added that the UFO was only 40 feet from the plane. The cockpit recording referenced the Japan Airlines 1628 incident, which had only occurred a month earlier. The pilots of the military aircraft were startled as they observed what they believed was a similar shaped object, flying in the same manner and maneuvering just the same as the one previously reported by the Japanese Airlines flight. About 30 minutes later, Anchorage Control Tower relayed a message from the FAA informing the pilot to contact them upon landing. The FAA wanted a full report on the UFO seen by the crew. The very next day, on January 31st, Another similar sighting occurred over Alaskan skies. Alaska Airlines Flight 53 reported enormous disc-like objects flying near their aircraft. These UFOs, according to the pilot's report, were tracking Flight 53. The control tower operator said to the pilot that they did not show anything unusual on radar. The pilot of Flight 53 was very concerned, stating that the UFO was moving at a mile per second, which would be about 3,600 miles per hour. The pilot also stated that the UFO had almost immediately disappeared after flying under Flight 53. Neither of these encounters were adequately explained by any conventional flying objects or atmospheric anomalies and remain a mystery. The reports requested never surfaced. In 2006, John Callahan gave his eyewitness testimony about his official investigation into the Japanese airline incident.
The leader line they call it that points toward the target itself. This is what is altitude, and the altitude's normally written down in hundreds. And see that little, the little dot right there? That dot don't belong there. That's the unknown. Is that dot that's in front of that slash? He doesn't belong there. I'm one of those what you would call the high government official in the FAA. I was a division chief. There was only 3 or 4 down from the admiral. I became the branch chief for the quality control. The quality control branch later on became a division, and I became a division chief, and they called it the Accidents Investigations Branch in Washington, D.C. We investigated all the airline incidences, all the accidents. I stayed there for about 6 years and then retired. The way it started is there was a 747, a Japanese Airlines 747 was coming from the northwest going across the Alaskan territory. And he was at either 31, 33, or 35,000 feet. And it was, I want to say around 11 o'clock at night, but you can check the real times. He called and asked the controller if the controller had any traffic at his altitude. And the controller said no. Basically, it was a midnight operation. They didn't have too much traffic. And he said, well, something like I have a target at my 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock position, about 8 miles. Now, in the 747, they have radar in the nose that picks up the weather outside there. So his radar is picking up a target. He sees this target with his eye, and the target, the way he described it, was a huge ball with lights running around it, and I think he said it was like 4 times as big as a 747. Well, on the day I'm doing PERs, I got behind, and I told the secretary not to bother me, I'm doing PERs. And a few minutes later, the phone's ringing, and then she wouldn't stop calling. So I asked what was going on. She said, you got to talk to the people in Alaska. So I said, all right. So I forgot who it was that called. But he says, we got a problem here. I don't know what to tell the media. The whole office is full of the media from Alaska. What's the problem? He says, well, it's that UFO. I said, what UFO? He says, well, we last week we had a UFO chase a 747 across the skies up here for about 30 minutes or so, and we didn't think too much of it. He says, but apparently the word got out, and we have all these news people here, and we want to know what to tell them. So being an old government employee, I told him what you always tell them, is tell them it's under investigation, and then get all that data together. I wanted all the discs that they had and all the tapes that they had available, and flown overnight to the tech center at Atlantic City. But they called the military, and they told the military they wanted all their tapes. We also control, the FAA controls all the airspace above the United States and its territory. It doesn't belong to the military, it doesn't belong to the guys shooting the rockets off. It belongs to the United States government, and it's controlled by the FAA. Nobody moves in this airspace unless we get the approval. So I told them to get the military's tapes and all their data and ship that down. Well, they called back an hour or so later, and they said the military said they were short on their tapes, and they had to put them back in service, and it's only been 12 days. So the administrator sent my boss was the associate director, Hobby Sophia. Sounds like safer, but it's Sophia. Sent him and me to Atlantic City to look at this thing to see if he had something to worry about. So we went in and told him that we wanted this room set up to be just like it was in Anchorage, and we wanted all that data to come to this scope, and we wanted to see everything the controller seen. We wanted to hear everything he heard, and we wanted it all tied together, the radar, the digital radar, and the sound. Found out later that some of the people that were working on that side of the fence that were displaying this had already reviewed the tapes and didn't feel comfortable in showing us what was on there. But they ran it through. When the air traffic controller had asked the military man, do you see anything? The military guy says, yes, I have a target at such and such. 1 o'clock and 8 miles from the Japanese pilot, 747. The military man said something like, yeah, I see him 35 miles north of Anchorage, and who's that at 11 or 1 o'clock in his position? And the FAA controller said, I don't have anybody. Do you have anybody? He said, it's not mine. And he came back and said, we have no traffic here. And a couple times during the operation, the Japanese pilot would say he's now at 11 o'clock, he's now at 1 o'clock, he's now at 3 o'clock, he was bouncing around, this guy here, and when he would say that, the military guy would cut in and say he's now at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and he would confirm the position. The military controller has what they call height-finding radar, and they have long-range radar and short-range radar, so if they don't catch it on one of their systems, they catch it on the other, and if you listen to the military man, at one time he said, I have it on the height radar, or my range radar, whatever he called it, which indicated that he had a target on his system. Oz wouldn't record it. Well, they ran through for the best part of 31 minutes. The UFO would be in one position or the other, following our Japanese 747. After a while, they changed his altitude. It still stayed with him. They gave him a 360. When you're a 747, you make a 360, it takes you a few minutes to turn around, you cover a lot of space. It still stayed with him. It was either in the front, on the side, or behind him. 10, I approve 1628 to make deviations as necessary for traffic. The traffic stayed with 1628 through turns and descents in the vicinity of Fairbanks. I requested 1628 make a right 360. They would see that the target be at 1 o'clock and 7 or 8 miles, and then next it would be on the next sweep, which would be like 10 seconds later, it would be behind him 7 or 8 miles, and it always stayed 7 or 8 miles away from the target when it was all done. And we went back to Washington the next day. The administrator had called down and wanted to know if he had a problem or not. And my boss had told him, well, we took a video of it, and it looks like there might have been something there. Well, his thing was, can you come up and give us a quick 5-minute rundown? What happened? So we go up to the 10th floor, and in the conversation of a 4 or 5 minute debriefing, the administrator, which was Ingen at the time, Admiral Ingen, he said, well, have you got that video with you? Can you show me the video? And I said, yeah, and, you just plug it in and play it. So we plugged it in for him. He started watching it, and after about 5 minutes, he told the staff, I cancel my, he had a meeting with someone in 15 minutes. He says, first he said, I'll be late, and then next it was cancel, and then I'm going to be here till this is over. So he watched the whole thing just over half an hour. When they got all,
this was the administrator of FAA?
The administrator of the FAA. We got all done. He says, what do you guys think? Well, I guess that's why he was the service director and I wasn't. He gave a good political answer that said he wasn't sure what it was. Didn't know if it was anything. So his take was, don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to anybody until I give you the okay. The next day, I got a call from someone with the scientific study group or the CIA, I'm not sure who it was the first time. And they wanted to know, they had some questions about the incident. And I had said, I don't know what you're talking about, you probably want to call the Admiral. A few minutes later, the Admiral calls down and says, I set up a briefing tomorrow morning at 9 or 10 o'clock, what it was. In the round room, bring all the stuff you have, bring everybody up there, and give them whatever they want. And we want to get out of it, just let them do whatever they want to do with it. So I brought all the people from the tech center, We went upstairs. We had all kinds of boxes of data that we had them print out, filled up the room. They brought in 3 people from the FBI, 3 people from the CIA, and 3 people from Reagan's scientific study team, and I don't know who the rest of the people were. But they were all excited. We gave them the video, let them watch the video, and I had they had all kinds of questions about the frequencies, the rate of the antenna turning, on and on and on. How many radars, how many antennas, how's the data get processed? They were all excited the only way a man would be if that was his job. When they got done, they actually swore all these other guys into that this never took place. We never had this meeting, and this was never recorded. Now, what I tried to tell you before...
Who said that? Who was saying
this? This was one of the guys from the CIA, okay, that... they were never there. This never happened. When I asked them at the time, I said, well, I don't know why you're saying this. I mean, it's if there was something there, and if it's not the stealth bomber, then, you know, it's a UFO. And if it's a UFO, why wouldn't you want the people to know? Oh, they get all excited over that. You don't even want to say those words. He said this is the first time they ever had 30 minutes of radar data on a UFO, and they're all itching to get their hands into the data and to find out what it is and what really goes. And if they come out and told the American public that they ran into a UFO out there, it would cause panic across the country, so therefore you can't talk about it. And they're taking all this data. So I said, okay, take all that data. That's what you want.
Who took the data?
Well, that group. I don't know who it went to, but that group took it. But they took only what we had there. They didn't ask me if there was anything else that I had. They said they're taking all this data. And I said, fine. Now, I had the original video that I took, and I had the pilot's report that came through, the first report, and I had the FAA's first report that was all downstairs on my table. They didn't ask for that, so I didn't give it to them. And later on, when I retired, that was the stuff that was in my office, and all that came with me, and we've been sitting on that ever since. So we watched the whole thing. Now, what happened at the end is as the Japanese 747 is leaving the airspace, there's a United coming up to land in Alaska. The controller says to the United, we've got a Japanese 747 up here that is being chased, followed by a UFO. We'd like you to check them out. Can we leave you at the altitude? And the United says, fine, or sure. And so they give them a left turn, 20 degrees or so, keep them at his altitude, and they kind of run them in toward the Japanese 747. Once the 2 airplanes pass, that target follows the United down through the airspace until he gets on final and then disappears. When they read the reports that come through, the FAA has to protect themselves, so you can't say you saw a target, even though this is what he said. So they made him change his report to position symbols, which makes it sound like it wasn't really a target. Well, if that's not a target, then a lot of the other position symbols that we're separating from aren't targets either. And when I read that, I thought, there's something fishy here, that somebody's worried about something rather than they're trying to cover up. When the CIA told us that this never happened and we never had this meeting, I believe it was because they didn't want the public to know that this was going on. Normally, we would put out some type of a news release that such and such happened. That I think it was mysterious that the military tapes disappeared. It wasn't right. We went from 30 days to 15 days, and the first indication makes it look like it must have been a military operation that they were doing up there, or the military knew more than we did about who the visitors were, and they didn't want anybody else to know. And of course, the people that are involved at the lower levels don't really know what's going on above them. When someone calls up and says, put those tapes back in service, they just put them back in service. They really don't care. When they asked me what I thought, I told them that it looked like we had a UFO that was up there. The reason it wasn't on the FAA's tapes was because it was too large of an aircraft, and it was picked up as weather, so we wouldn't record it. That the pilot, the Japanese pilot, seen it. The Japanese pilot drew pictures of it. Eventually, they gave the Japanese pilot a hard time because of what he said. He was embarrassing his country. Our military controllers said they seen it. Our FAA controllers said they seen it. Our FAA controllers, after a period of time, came back and said they really didn't see a target. They saw something else, which makes it sound like somebody is helping them fill out the reports, and therefore that looks suspicious. During the period of 2030, I was on duty and I was working the D-50. I'm making this statement to clarify certain points in my original statement on November the 19th. This was January the 6th. My guess is, because of the way it was, it's not part of the military's operation anymore, that it was a UFO. But who do you tell that you were involved in a UFO incident without them looking at you like you ain't wrapped too tight? And this is, I think, is the way our country is set up now. If someone comes out and says, I saw a UFO on TV, the only ones that see a UFO in the TV programs are the rednecks out in the country that are going coon hunting or alligator hunting at night. You don't find anybody with any kind of smarts or some professional individual saying, hey, last night, let me tell you what I saw. They don't display that in the United States. So if you talk about seeing a UFO, you're putting yourself in a funny kind of a category. That's probably one reason why you don't hear about it anymore. As far as I'm concerned, I saw a UFO chase a Japanese 747 across the sky for over half an hour on radar. And see, all these little hits are something that they have to explain all the time. If you can go within it was a 10-second radar, so at 1 o'clock and 7 miles, you see them, and then 10 seconds later, or even not even 10 seconds later, it's less than 10 seconds, because when the system got southwest of the sweep got southwest of the Japanese 747, it picked them up again, so it would go from 1 o'clock, 7 or 8 miles to 6, 7 o'clock, 7 or 8 miles inside of 4 or 5 seconds. You have to be moving pretty quickly, and it's faster than anything that I know of in our government.
2:30, 6:50. So. Okay, we're right on time. We're close enough.
I've been involved in a lot of cover-ups with the FAA. When we gave the presentation to the Reagan staff, I was behind the group that was there, and when they were speaking to the people in the room, they had all those people swear that this never happened. They never had me swear it never happened. It always bothered me that we have these things going on, and when you see something or you hear something on the radio or TV, the news, that it's put down as it's not there. I have a hard time saying nothing because it's not there. When I first told those that I knew about this, it just died. I mean, nothing ever happens. So you look at it kind of funny, like, and it still bothers me that I've seen all this, I know all this, and like I'm walking around like with the answer, and nobody wants to ask the question to get the answer, and it kind of irritates me a little bit. And I don't believe our government should be set up that way. I think when we have something like this, that you could probably find out more about what's going on in the world. If they can travel that far, that distance, with that type of machinery, who knows what they could do here for the health of the nation, of the people, the food they could give them, the cancers we could cure. They have to know more than us to be able to travel in that speed. I sure would like to know what's going on. And that's one reason why I'm not afraid to talk about what's happening. What I can tell you is what I've seen with my own eyes, and I said, I've got a videotape, I've got I got the voice tape, I've got the reports that were filed that will confirm what I've been telling you. Those people that say that if these UFOs existed, then someday would be on radar and that to be professionals would see it, then I can tell them that back in 1986 there were enough professional people that saw it. It was brought down to headquarters, FAA headquarters, Washington, D.C. The administrators seen the tape of it. The people that we were debriefing, they've all seen. Reagan Scientific Study Team, the three of those professors, doctors, they've seen it. As far as I was concerned, they were the ones that verified my own thoughts about it. They were very, very excited about the data. They had said at that time this was the only time, and they had used the words a UFO was ever recorded on radar for any length of time where it's 30-some minutes, and they have all this data to look at. Now, a 30-minute radar return filled up boxes across the thing, and the boxes were stacked, 2 or 3 high. There was a lot of paper data to look at. They knew the frequency now of the radar. They knew how fast it turned. They knew where it was. They had the military that confirmed it. And when I gave my card, the CIA guy said, we're with the company. They don't say CIA. And the company, we don't have cards. We don't have company cards. They may have a card, but it's nothing to do with the company. And he said that there's nothing we can give out. I'm sure on the Admiral's calendar, they have who reserved that, or they should have, who reserved the room and who was there for the day of the briefing. Even the Admiral had to talk about it wherever he went because he canceled too many meetings to watch this thing here. And it was late at night when we got back. We got back at either 4:30, 4:45. And they he canceled his meetings, and to me that meant that he thought it was something to say. We had a government investigator come by checking just a few weeks ago, checking on an individual that we know for his security clearance with the CIA, and she's with the CIA checking on him to make sure he's an okay guy. And during this period of time, I had said, well, I've been involved with the CIA one other time, and, oh, what was that? So when I started giving her this UFO thing, you could see her look, like she's in the room with 2 kooks, and like, can I get out of here safe? It's the only thing you could see on her face. And it was panic, and I'm thinking, that's the way the world, but I think that's the way the government wants the outside people to view those that have seen something like this, like they are kooks, they're not wrapped too tight, and you got to watch out for them. That's the image that they put out. I guess I really don't care about the image, but I do feel like they had something and that we've seen it.
So what can we make out of these sightings made by credible witnesses, including Air Force pilots, flight engineers, experienced pilots, air traffic controllers, and aviation investigators? It is obvious that something was witnessed, independently verified over the course of 3 separate encounters by both aircraft and ground crews. But what was it? And more importantly, why was it seemingly tracking and observing these 3 aircraft? Is it the occupants on the aircraft that held interest, or the cargo they were carrying?